we're going to start with the Houston Rockets, and I kind of want to go on a bit of a rant on my frustrations with watching that team play. And then I want to talk about all NBA picks with you. That's really going to be the crux of the show. The Rockets are going to be like 15 minutes at the top. Then we're probably going to do like 40 minutes, 35 minutes on all NBA. And then we're going to talk about Brice Sensabaugh, my dearly beloved Ohio State Buckeye, who is unfortunately slowly but surely on the track to being a one and done. This just keeps happening to Chris Holtmann. Unfortunately, he keeps evaluating these guys at a better level than anyone else. Malachi Branham is another example of this from last year where, you know, you think you're getting these guys for 2 years and it just ends up that their offensive system is so good and the player ends up being way better than what he was ranked in the recruiting class that it ends up being a situation where they don't keep them for multiple years. But I do want to start with the Houston Rockets. So the Houston Rockets are a mess. They are currently 10-29. They are last place in the Western Conference. For me, the frustrations with Houston, they're 29th in offense, 28th in defense. They're not really doing anything well right now. And there's nothing about the process that you can point to that looks positive. Before I get into my spiel in terms of my, like, what I want to see happen at this point, what have been your impressions of the Houston Rockets thus far this season, Mark?
I think it's tough because on one hand, yeah, you can look at the record and it's been disappointing. I do think there have been a couple of like nicer growths. We had that 2 or 3 week spurt where they were really playing well. It felt like they were in every single game. Felt like they were really starting to find some sort of offensive identity. And then the last 2 weeks, that's really dissipated. We got the Eric Gordon comments like right after Christmas, basically saying that he wasn't wrong, but to have a player who's a veteran on that team come out and say that, knowing that they're being recorded was something, basically just saying, you know, like, we haven't improved on anything. We suck. And I mean, just seeing some of the stuff too, like, I don't know how much validity there was to it, but from somebody who was at the game, I believe 2 days ago, when they got absolutely destroyed by the Utah Jazz as the game went down the stretch, Jabari Smith was yelling to pull Alperen Şengün because of what it looked like defensively.
Was it the Jazz or the Pelicans?
It was the Pelicans game. My bad.
I thought it was the Pelicans.
And point being, that's not to point fingers at any player, but it's clear that players are pointing fingers at one another on that team. That's not great. I think that's contributing to a lot of what has been playing out on court, which is, like, I don't like using the term selfish basketball, but there's been a lot of selfish basketball.
No. Right, we have to use it for the Houston Rockets.
It's been really difficult to watch at times. And it just does not feel good. I mean, Steven Silas got thrown out of that game. Was that against, I can't remember if that was against the Jazz or the Pelicans right now on top of my head. But point being, there's a lot bubbling up in Houston right now that has felt like it's been on the horizon for a while, and I think it's finally coming to a head.
Yeah, they've lost 11 of 12, including games to the Spurs, the Magic, the Knicks at home, the Mavericks at home, the Jazz at home, the Blazers at home, the Heat at home. Like, a lot of these games just weren't all that, like, competitive either. Like, the Jazz game was not competitive at home. Even the Knicks game was not competitive at home, it felt like. And they've had some competitive ones. Like, they lost by 6 to Orlando. You know, they lost by, I want to say, like 3 to the Heat when starting this little 11 losses in 12 games stretch here. But when I watch that team, there just is no, it feels like, I don't want to say that there is no, it feels like there is no plan. It feels like there is a lot of selfish basketball play occurring on the court where, for instance, you know, last night or 2 nights ago, I think against the Pelican, I can't remember. There's like a possession that Steve Jones pointed out on Twitter. And like, I watched this full game, but like Steve, I think, put it the right way. Just like, where is the ball movement, basically, where it's like, okay, Jalen Green is in the corner. He's going to dribble for 8 seconds. He's going to kick it out to Eric Gordon. He's going to dribble for 8 seconds. And he kicks it to Kevin Porter. They haven't even gotten inside the 3-point line yet. It feels like he's going to dribble for 8 seconds. Then he's going to throw up a wild shot. Right. And That's just not good basketball. But more importantly, for this team that is very young, and there are other issues here in terms of like the roster build and everything, it's just not conducive to development. That's the big thing that I keep coming back to. Like, the way that the Rockets play basketball is not helping any of these guys actually develop on the court. And they need Jalen Green, Jabari Smith, Alperen Şengün, Tari Eason, etc. down the list in terms of all of the young guys, Usman Garuba, Ty Washington, Kenya Martin Jr., like, etc. They have so many young guys. They need them to get better. And Kevin Porter Jr. is like second in the NBA in turnovers right now. I think Jalen Green's like top 20 in the NBA in turnovers right now. And it's just because they dribble constantly and incessantly, game after game after game. And like, part of it is that you can look at it and be like for instance, like when I watch Alperen Şengün, right? I don't know if he's good or not yet watching him. Like, there are great things that he does on the court. There are phenomenal things he does on the court where he can handle the ball. He's a legit mismatch opportunity. He can go out and grab and go in transition. He's a really high level passer. He's a great offensive rebounder. But like, he's really bad defensively still. He's not good in pick and roll coverages. He's a bit undersized for the center position, so the bigger guys can kind of beast him a little bit on the defensive glass. That actually has been like a bit of a problem for them this year, that he doesn't really hold up his own on the defensive glass. And then on top of it, he can't shoot and loves to operate in that little like mid post area. So when Jalen Green, Kevin Porter are driving, he can't really pop out and shoot because he can't shoot. He's just not a threat there. So nobody treats him as a threat there. So everyone just drops them and says, okay, we're just going to pack the paint the entire time. And he's often kind of standing in the mid post or in the dunker spot. And it clogs everything up in a very real way, to where there are things he does on the court that are great. And like when they run the offense through him at times, you can see a world where he can do a lot of those things and make your team better in the same way that someone like a Nikola Vucevic can. But then you watch them dribble and try and like operate in the mid post, and it's like, well, he's just kind of taking up space in a big way and like isn't really a threat when he doesn't have the ball in his hands, unless he's like crashing the offensive glass off of misses. So it's complicated. Like, Alperen Şengün is like is like just indicative, I think, of this entire situation. And we can point to the front office, I think, here, right? Like, we need to have a conversation about that, where there are no real veteran leaders seemingly on this team outside of maybe Eric Gordon, right? Jayshawn Tate's the captain, but Jayshawn Tate up until last night, like, has missed a lot of time. I think he's played 5 games this year, 6 games, something like that. It's, Eric Gordon's coming out in the public saying there is no improvement. I believe was his quote. They need vets. Like, they need older dudes to come in and hold people accountable as much as anything. It seems like Jabari Smith is trying to hold people accountable. Like, him yelling at Alperen Şengün, I don't really have a problem with that, to be honest. Him yelling at the coaches to take him out, like, that's competitive. It's frustrating. They're losing a lot, but it comes out of a positive place. If I was Şengün, I'd be frustrated with that, like, understandably, but I think it comes from a good place. And there are real front office issues, but ultimately where I'm going with this is I do think it's time for a coaching change there. I don't know if Steven Silas is bad. Like, I don't know if he's a bad coach or not, but I do feel pretty confident at this point that he's not the coach for this group to try and take them to the next developmental level. Yeah, you can point to the front office and say that they have not made Steven Silas's job easy in terms of not giving them vets, but I don't think Steven Silas is helping matters at all with what he's doing out there. I just don't like this. The process is not good when you watch the Houston Rockets. So I think it's time, to be honest. Like, I think we've kind of seen enough at this point. They've lost 11 of 12. I think this is kind of the time that's ripe. And as much as anything, what a coaching change does is it changes it puts the onus more on the players at that point, I think, to say, look, we've changed the coach. We know that like now, if it still fails after we've changed the coach, that's a good indication that it's not the coach, it's you guys. And then we have to start making moves with you guys. So as much as anything, I just want to see a different process. I want to see different offense being run. I want to see more ball movement. I want to see more. I just want to see more like inclusive basketball when these guys play.
Yeah, I mean, I think it has to be a two-pronged attack for them because, like you're mentioning, it's not. I mean, I haven't really been inspired by Steven's stylus, but also it's hard to know with what he has to work with. I mean,
he might be an okay coach. Like I'm not saying that he's a bad coach.
Oh yeah,
I just
no, I don't think
it's working there.
For sure. I mean, like
him.
when you start having all of this shit happening with guys blowing up like this, like that's to me that is on coaching in to some extent. But like I appreciate you bringing up the front office as well because this is just not much on just as much on them to clean up. So saying mess is the wrong way to put it, but like this is the bed that they made, so they have to rectify it. Like they have to be willing to bring in a couple vets. Like I think that it is already time to part with a few of their young players. As much as that's not appealing, they need to bring in veteran players who are A, going to be comfortable in their roles, and B, are going to elevate what guys do. Like when you have so many guys who are all trying to figure out their games, and clearly like you have nights where some guys are maybe trying to do a little too much because they're still trying to figure out their roles or they want to have a bigger role, and that's not an indictment on them. That's part of being a young player. And I think when you even look ahead to what this next draft is going to be, they have multiple picks in this coming draft. How are they like? I already have questions about how they're supposed to, obviously it's going to be different because you're going to have really high end talent coming in based on where they draft, but that adds even more questions to, okay, how are you going to fill out this roster in a meaningful way that gives you there have been nights where, just based on a week, even with guys being healthy, like Steven Silas has played like 11 guys and gone into very different lineups night to night. Like there's got to be some more direction built out through that. I think part of that comes with adding more veteran guys who can show that up, who can be steady presences, on the sidelines and in the locker room, and just in general having more direction there. And that's not to say that there isn't a good base of what the talent is, but in terms of actually like, hammering it out into something that's going to be different from this next year, I think that, I'm there with you that they need to make some pretty significant changes.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the picks thing, right? Like they have a lottery pick, like undeniably what will be a very, very high-end pick in this draft. They're currently tied with Charlotte for the worst record in the league, but they also have pick 28 in this draft. If I was them, I would move pick 28 because I just would not want another like borderline young player on this roster. You have Usman Garuba, KJ Martin, Tari Eason, Ty Washington, et cetera, right? In terms of the young guys that you're already trying to develop on this team, that's just a lot of roster spots for young guys that are all trying to find their games at once. I think it would behoove them to move this pick and just say, look, we can't take on another borderline prospect like this, right? Go out, move that pick for a veteran who can just be an adult in the room, right? I know that, like, here's the other part of that too. That makes you potentially better this year. And that's not something anyone in Houston wants at this point, I would imagine. Like, they probably want to be worse as much as they can be. But, like, can you find a veteran that isn't going to help your win-loss total this year, but will bring some accountability to the organization? They're so bad at this point, though, that I think that, like, even adding real accountability, just given how young they are and everything, it's probably not going to affect their win-loss total to the point where they fall out of the top 4, right? Like they are 6.5 games ahead of the number 6 spot right now. So like they have no chance really of falling out of the top 5 in the draft lottery. And like the odds go for number 1 overall, which is really the pick that they want, like 14% to 10.5% at that point. I almost think that like getting better and getting more veteran help in there is probably worth that 3.5% drop odds wise in terms of getting the number 1 overall pick. And the odds are that you probably won't drop that far, even if you get better, just because a lot of your guys are still trying to figure out how to play at this point. So yeah, that's where I'm at on Houston.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you, man.
It's frustrating. It's a frustrating team to watch, but I think they need to make a change. Like they need to just make a circuit breaker move. And typically the circuit breaker is changing coaches, in my opinion. So